Right, so I want to do a simple landscape. I'm using a photograph that I took on one of my walks this summer, and I just think it has nice colors and nice light, and I love the geese. However, I think I want to move the geese, so I did this in pen for Inktober. I think I want to move the geese so they're flying, instead of flying out of the painting, they're flying into the painting. I might not want them to be very big like that, but I do quite like the drawing, so I'll probably do more of this than of this. So I'm going to put this up in front of me so that I can better see it. So I'm going to do a simple drawing, so I want to be careful about where my focal point in this drawing. The focal point is definitely the geese, and they take up 2/3 of the paper, and they come up about 2/3 this way. So this goose is actually at the cross section of horizontal and vertical, so I think that's a good place to have a focal point. And so I want to start the landscape, and I've exaggerated the slope because I want to start at a different place than where I end. So I want to exaggerate the diagonal. It gives me a sense of movement in my paintings, and we got the geese flying in at an angle instead of flat across. I actually wanted to make these two geese look like they were on the other side of the V, and these two geese being on the close side of the V. So I've got those distant hills. In the drawing I had them I made a mistake with the pen, and with the pen you can't really correct. So I like this foreground hill here, and then this background hill I have two peaked. So just a simple separate the sky from the ground, and now I want to double check myself that I'm not hitting it right in the center of the page on either side, and I am not. Okay, and then I kind of want to think about the cross section horizontal. If I think about the rule of thirds, and I'm just going to kind of mark that spot there. That's where I want the head of that forward goose to be. If I think about it being a third, maybe even back a little bit closer. Okay, and now I have to get all this foreground interest in. So there's a distant tree line. I'm just going to put that in, and keeping it really simple, not trying to do any detail. I don't have to be super specific. And then I want the perspective to appear correct, so I'm just going to decide where I want the tops of the fence posts. And I really like this golden brush, grass, whatever it is there. So I want to think of a vanishing point off here, and I want to sort of exaggerate the vanishing. So I'll kind of carve in around there. The bushes get bigger as they get closer to me. So those are my important elements to me. I'm not going to erase that. Okay, let's find the bottom edge. So this is along a golf course. So these distant green hills are actually greens from the golf course, but I don't necessarily think that's an important part of the painting. Might be as I paint it. And then I notice that this dark area, I'm just thinking of lights and darks, kind of follows the fence post line. So I'm going to now find my line that was the top of the fence post. I want to find that angle So it's just a little bit below eye level, so it has a little bit of a slope to it. And as it gets further and further away, that slope gets more severe. So the top fence line, or the top of the fence post, is not quite horizontal. So I'm going to bring my first fence post in here, and now I don't want to go above it. So there's a little bit of dimension to the fence post. I don't really have to draw these in, I can just do calligraphy strokes, but I want to talk about how the perspective works. So the tops of the fence posts will all start the same, and then the space between them will get shorter and shorter. So we have this space. I want to make sure I don't go all the way that far. And then now this space has to get a lot shorter. So I'm going to go right there. Going to keep the top of that post the same, but the bottom of the posts vanish at a different angle, like that. So they eventually collapse somewhere over here at my vanishing point. So closer, closer, almost by half. So that's kind of my fence post lines, and I might sneak in a hint of one over there, I'm not sure. Even one kind of crooked over there. But the fence posts end inside this golden grass. And kind of come out. I want it to be irregular and organic. And this tops, so this will be kind of a yellow ochre color. I don't want to get carried away. By the way, I'm working on hot press, or excuse me, cold press paper, but the back side of it, so it's a little more textured. And my plan is to do a flat wash of colors all the way through, and I'm going to basically ignore everything except the sky color, or just a flat wash. I just want to do a flat wash and ignore all this detail that I'm drawing in. And we'll find these treetops later on. So that's pretty much all the drawing I want to do. I'm going to stop and clean out my palette now and start a new painting. I probably should say, you notice I didn't actually draw in the geese. I don't want to have pencil lines in my cloud. The only thing I have is a slight little X for later when I paint the geese. I want to know where I want them to end. But I don't want that to interfere with my flat wash, having pencil marks in my sky. Okay. Okay, so I have my palette cleaned out. Now I have to decide what colors I want to use for my painting. I definitely want ultramarine blue for the sky. So I'm going to get a whole bunch of paint out. And I want to make my paint sort of a milky strength, and I want a lot of it, and it has to be wet and flowing, not too thin. I'm using an old brush just to mix my paint so I don't have to clean out my good brush too much. I want my good brush to be clean. And I'm going to wet the surface first so that I can get fewer striations in the sky. I find that's a better way to do it. I don't like streaky skies. I'm going to completely ignore this light that's coming there. It makes it pretty dramatic, but I'm not going to worry about it. Okay, then for the foreground grasses, which is another important element to me, I wanted to have kind of a ochre color, so I'm going to use Raw Sienna Light by Daniel Smith, and I want to make sure these two colors are the same strength of pigment. So, and I need a lot of it. I'm going to get that blue out of there because I don't want to pollute my whole well. Yellow skews really easily to another color, so even a little spot of it I don't want in there. Okay. I typically go with the same color to the same mixing area, so I pull the paint out of the well and into the mixing area. Get my brush fairly clean, and now I'm going to add water until I feel like it's the same strength as that. I like to make up more than I think I need for a nice flat wash. I think I'm going to use this quinacridone coral for my red. It's a pinky color, but it skews a little more to the warm side than my rose, and I like it for distant hills. Don't need as much of this as I do the other two, but I want to make sure it's the same strength, and it tends to thin down a lot easier than the other colors. Okay, just add a little bit of water to that. Okay, then because it is a golf course, I am going to pre-mix a green using the same colors over here and add just the two colors that I have already decided upon for a greenish color, maybe more yellow and less blue. I might actually add a little bit of the warm yellow to it. I just want it to be green, but not super bright green. How about a little bit of that as well? Yeah, I like that. I don't want it to be overwhelmingly green. I want it to be kind of an olive green, mostly with the same color, so we have color harmony. So I'm basically using 5 colors, a little bit of yellow. I might want to put some of that yellow into the golden brush as well, at least down at the bottom. Okay, so now I'm going to do a flat wash. So what I want to do is get my good clean brush, hopefully clean brush, and I'm going to wet the whole surface of the paper, and I'm going to do it using my good Caress method. And I want this surface to be wet so I don't get the striations that I tend to get on a flat sky. So I want this all to be wet all the way down. And I want to try to remember to leave a few highlights everywhere of white. Okay, so I get it nice and wet. I'm going to move that drawing out of the way now so I don't ruin it. And if I don't put it at a slant, it'll be wet kind of surface more evenly. I want to just get my first wash done. I have an appointment coming in about half an hour, so that puts me on a time limit. Okay, so now I want to dry back. I don't want this to be super wet and watery, so I'm going to dry it back a bit with what I call the squeegee method to make it sort of damp and take off the shine. I can get most of the water up down here by letting it jump into my brush. So the back side of this was the beginning of a painting I didn't like, so I'm using up my paper, and it basically turns it into a rough paper. I hope it's not going to suck up my paint. I've been told that the front side of the paper is the smooth side by someone who actually went to the plant and in Arches in France and they say they put this external sizing on the smooth side, but I painted on the wrong side of the paper for years thinking it was the right side, so I'm happy with either side. It is a little rougher, grabs your brush a little bit more. Okay, so now I've lost the sheen, which is perfect, and I'm going to start with pretty strong pigment of blue, and then I want to grade it as I come down the page. So I'm going to use my Caress, or I'm going to do a whole line all at once. If I skip, I want a bead to form, so I might have to. Okay, then I'm going to add clean water and weaken my pigment just a bit. And then I'm going to catch that bead and I'm going to pull it down. The page, I want it to get dried back quite a bit. I might have gone a little too severe all at once. Okay, now in here I wouldn't mind a couple of skips and I can find highlights. Let's weaken it just a little bit more. Mix it up. I want to get that bead forming. And I should do some dry brushing. This is where my geese are going to be, so I wouldn't mind having a few highlights showing through. Now I'm going to change at the horizon line to the ochre color and just pull that down. Having a couple skips is fine. I'm going to go into the red as well. Might have some damaged paper there. So I just want to get a sense of those distant hills. I'm going to go into the green, so I get a sense of the grass. Leave a couple of white skips. Don't want to leave it right on the edge of the paper though. So that's the green. There is kind of a path there, so I'm going to put a strip of the blue, leaving some white skips, and now I'm going to go into my ochre color and sort of put that in there. Go ahead and brighten it up with the warm yellow in some spaces. Let it come across there. And then I want basically all color in here. So I'm going to start with the blue, go to the red, go to the green, leave some highlights, go to the ochre. Let's do a little more blue. So my blue got diluted because of the graded wash. I shouldn't go back up in there. I shouldn't go back up in there. Listen to yourself. The only thing I want to do is not put white edges right on the edge of the painting. So that's all I'm going to do, except clean out my brush. And keep an eye on this bead. I'm going to come around the side and wipe off the bead so I don't let that water flow back into my painting. So that's a variegated wash of color. I like it. I'm really tempted to go back in and fix stuff, but I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to watch this bead form and keep collecting it over here so it doesn't dry off and create a background. Okay, I'm going to stop this. So we're back now, everything is dry. I'm just going to mix up some murky green. I'm going to work kind of back to front. So I'm just going to get a glaze of blue, and I want to figure out where the light's coming from. And I want to put some blue hills. I'm just going to tip the paint in and then blend it back into there to hint at that distant blue hill and the other one that's back there. So tip the paint in and then blend it back. I want it to be really indistinct. And then as I get closer, now I want to warm it up a little bit. So I'm going to bring a little bit of the red into the blue and make these kind of purple hills. More purple than they actually appear on the photograph. And then I want to mix it up and not make it all homogeneous purple. And maybe leave some areas touched and some untouched. And take a bit, clean my brush. I want to just kind of mess it up so it's not a solid edge there. Take a little bit of this green, almost just want to splatter into there. It's a little bit thicker. While it's wet, I'm going to put something over the sky. I don't really want to get other splatters in the sky. So I'm going to get some green and kind of splatter. It's got to be pretty runny in order to splatter off the brush. So just want to get it in there while it's wet so it'll be indistinct. Little distant trees back in there. We may splatter up. I might have waited too long. So just get the impression of some distant trees and maybe put some like we see on the ridge. Soften some of the edges. And maybe put some just little dots over in here, kind of hint at that over there. Okay, let's soften this edge as it comes back. Maybe put a couple, soften. I don't want to overdo this. It's really far away. There's hardly any detail. So, blue, blue, blue. If I want to separate the foreground mountains a little bit, I'll just darken that in some places. I don't want to spend too much time though. Okay, now I'm going to do the distant trees. So they're still far away, so we want everything that's super far away to be bluer and lighter than the foreground information. So I'm going to paint the bottom of the tree line, and I don't want to go all the way up. I want to leave little light holes. and I don't want it to be homogeneous. So I'm going to poke a little bit of red in there too, and a little bit of the yellow in there too, so that it's not all the same color. If you don't do anything else, change it up occasionally. Okay, and then pull that out. And we're probably going to find a few highlights by painting behind the tops of the trees. So when I get over here, I feel like they're getting a little bigger. So I put some yellow down, and then just letting my brush dance around. I'm leaving some tops lighter. Now I'm going to soften some of these edges. Just cleaning off my brush, getting it damp, and sort of messing up those edges a little bit up at the top. Underneath, now I want to get pretty dark because the air can't get underneath there, or the light can't get underneath, so I'm just going to pump up the volume on the pigment strength down at the bottom of the trees. Not everywhere, but in some of, bits here and there. Creates those shadows. Okay, then behind is the purpley mountains. I'm just gonna call out some tops of the trees by painting around behind to create that light effect on some of the tops of the trees. So I'm going to do that more in the purple tones. Put the paint down and then blend it out. So that gives me the effect of light on top of the trees there. Some places I'll go bluer, some places I'll go purpler. Just mix it up. Okay, so that's the distant row of trees. Now this brush is kind of purpley, dark. I'm going to get all my colors, mostly purple, but add a little yellow into it too to neutralize. And I'm going to find that ridge. I'm just going to completely ignore the fence posts. We're going to drop all that in later. So if I purple it up, it's going to be feel closer, especially if I make it stronger pigment. So I did the top, and now I'm just going to, while it's wet, add some stronger pigment to the bottom, create the sense of shadow underneath there. So that's that distant row. Okay, then I want to leave some of that green, but I want to make a decision if I want to put that row in there or not. That's that distant row. I probably made that too big. So I might just hint at it a little bit, this grasses. I don't want to lose those white tips. So I'm not going to make it as solid as it is in the picture this time around. I'm going to hint at some of those and then get a little stronger, tip some darks at the bottom of the little grasses and weeds. Go right off the edge of the page. Thinking on this side they're taller. I don't want to lose all those little highlights. Give my painting some sparkle. Okay, then I'm going to get some green, and I'm going to give the edge of this little path. So I'm going to use that highlight, and I'm just going to get a little grass edge along this little path. And remember, the path narrows as it gets into the distance. So I'm going to put a bush that crosses over in some places. So I'm going to carve around that golden grasses, which is what attracted me to the scene. Put some bushes that are bigger now. I'm just really squiggling. and carving around my golden grasses. I don't want to lose those highlights of white, and I want to cross the path occasionally. On the other side of the path grass, I'm going to just soften back one side of that edge there. And continue my little grasses as they get into the distance. They're starting to get bluer, but they're kind of framing my golden grass. And I'll go ahead and put a purpley tree that breaks the plane here. That's just its tree trunk. And there's that. And we'll do one big bush here that kind of connects and goes over to push that background back into the background and make that a warmer tree. Because if it's warmer, it'll come forward more. So now I have a tree that breaks that plane. In my drawing, I actually put a little branch that come over that way, so I'll get you back into the painting. So I'll do that too. Get my red, my blue, and a little bit of the yellow mixed all together, and I'll just scribble, but I want to break that horizon with some calligraphy strokes of an old dead branch tree over there. And has a little bit of light holes, so it shows it has some foliage. So that kind of pushes the mountains way back into the distance. Okay, so now I want to make this golden grass. So I'm going to bring in my warm yellow, which is New Gamboge. And now I'm going to actually use a few stroke likes, calligraphy strokes, and sort of drop that in there, get some of the yellow ochre or raw sienna in my case. I don't want to lose all those golden highlights though, or the soft whites. So it's darker and warmer in the foreground. So I'm actually going to put some red in the foreground as well. So I want to get some of my Quin Coral. So it's kind of a pinky tone, but it's more on the orange side of pink. Coral, like the name implies. It's a coral color, so I like to let the colors mix right on the page. And I'll just soften up some of those edges. I want it to feel almost, and then it gets a whole lot less distinct in the distance, so I don't, and a little greener. Okay, and now I'm going to mix up a murky dark with all my colors. Not too mixed, and I'm going to find the undergrowth in here on this little path that I walk down. So I'm going to call out the shapes of the edge of the brush by painting underneath. Soften in some edges, skip a little part. I'm going to go bluer with my murky dark. Let there be a little ridge. It's a dirt road. I want it to look like a dirt road. Get some brown, maybe do some dry brush across there. Make it look like some ruts. Connect that. Needs to be a little redder, I think. So in this foreground, I want it to be darker and bigger. So I'm going to put some nice darks in the foreground just to bring it all forward. Thinking about perspective all the time. Maybe I'll get some of these sort of minty grasses things sticking up from off camera. Coming in from off camera. Looking kind of dotty, so I'm going to just soften an edge in the distance. And I want to make these leaves here a little redder and a little more distinct. And then we're going to put in our fence posts. They look too soldiery there, so I'm just going to summarize that a little bit more where the peaks are. Okay. I want to really soften that edge as it goes up the hill there. Don't want to lose my greens. I'm going to put a kind of a dark, just a little calligraphy stroke right at the edge of that path. Put a little dark tone underneath there. Bring out that highlight a little bit. Okay, we got to put in the birds and we got to put in the fence posts. So, and we're going to scratch a few barbed wires that are shining in the light. So for the fence posts, I'll start with those. I've got my pencil strokes on there. I can barely see them, but I can see them. So I'm just going to mix up a dark with all three of my main colors. Get it really strong. And I want to do this quickly, one stroke, not belabor it. So I'm going to get up. I'm standing up. It's hard to. There we go. That one comes down off the page, so I don't want to take this one too far in. So find my pencil strokes. I want to start at the same line. And this guy actually has dimension. It's close enough to see that it has another side to it. Okay, did I do that one high enough? Okay. Needs to go a little higher. Okay, and then as I get further away, they're going to get bluer and lighter. So it looks like that's where my next plan stroke was. Before I go too far, I'm just going to kind of mess up the bottom. So it looks like it, looking at it, well, it's still wet. I just kind of want to mess up the bottom where it goes into the grass. So bluer and lighter. Make sure I've got those high enough. Okay, kind of mess up those bottoms. They go into the grasses. Okay, I'm going to get my pencil out and plan the birds a little bit. So I'm going to go by my plan here, and X marks the spot 2/3. So this is the lead goose, and I just want to do simple shapes. And vary the spacing a little bit so it doesn't look too regimented. Should try to use some of those white spots. Maybe I will. I'll put a highlight. And then silhouette them down like that. And then I'll have this guy coming up here, coming in off the page, maybe like that. So let me make sure I know what I'm doing. And then his tail is like that. So I have the advantage of having drawn it before and studied the shapes a little more than you. Okay, so I'm just going to make them pretty silhouetted. I need to get my source photo that I know. I'm going to start over here where it's not as important. I'm going to try really hard not to overdo my strokes. So there's one goose catching the highlight that I left accidentally on purpose. I like the shape of this goose a lot. Hopefully I can capture him. And this guy, you can almost see a feather back in there. Gets whiter. Leave a highlight. If I don't have one, I'll make one. And we skipped a space. The less I stroke, usually the better it is. And this guy, I'm going to go a little bluer. He's really stretching his neck out. Okay, and I'm going to do something scary and just mess up some of the edges so they look like they're moving. They're all stiff edges. Especially in the wings. Just going to mess them up a little bit so we lose some of that edge. Blur them up. Feels like movement. Don't really like this shape of this wing here, so let me The last thing I want to do is find my little snap knife. And I'm going to stretch back some barbed wire fencing. So I don't have to do it all the way like it is in the picture. I just want to get a hint of that wire, especially in the foreground. Put that tree behind the fence. Very much, just little hints of the white. It's best to let it get pretty dry before you do any scratching, and it needs to be the last thing you do. Marks beside your signature. I think I am gonna sketch a little highlight off my goose there. It got pretty thick. Okay, I think we'll call this little guy done. I could belabor it some more. I might just do a little bit more golden in the foreground. Just warm that up. Golden grass. Connect those shapes a little bit more, so that they don't look too disconnected. Pop a little bit of red in here in the foreground too. I want let that swim around a little bit. It just really brings it forward if you warm it up. Get my rigger brush and give it a signature. Sign it in the ready color, I think. Like to get it real inky. Use my rigger brush, reload. And color done. Oof, I just saw something. I think I want to just put some hints of darks in that. Got to wiped away. Just between those two. Cool. Kind of fun. Kind of a fun little painting.